Alexandra Eala vs Caty McNally. On paper, it's just another round of 32 match at the Canadian Open. One more step toward the round of 16. One more name waiting on the draw. But if that's all you see, you're missing the real story. Because this isn't simply about who wins the next match. It's about whether Alexandra Eala's unbelievable summer is only the beginning, or whether the pressure of success is finally about to catch up with her. And standing on the other side of the net is the perfect player to ask that question. Caty McNally isn't arriving with the spotlight. She isn't carrying the expectations of a newly crowned champion. She's arriving with something far more dangerous: a fresh body, renewed confidence, and absolutely nothing to lose. One player is trying to prove her biggest title wasn't a once-in-a-lifetime moment. The other is trying to remind the tennis world why everyone believed she would become a star before injuries interrupted everything. Momentum versus opportunity. Confidence versus creativity. And by the time this match is over, we might know whether Alexandra Eala's incredible rise is truly built to last. Because here's the reality. Winning your first WTA title changes everything. Before Washington, Eala walked onto the court as the underdog. Every victory felt like a surprise. Every upset made headlines because nobody expected it. She had freedom. She had nothing to defend. Now everything has changed. She arrives in Canada carrying a completely different identity. For the first time in her career, she's no longer chasing respect. She's expected to win. That may sound like a reward, but for young players, it's often the toughest challenge of all. Once you prove you belong, opponents prepare for you differently. They study your pattern. They analyze your strength. They enter the match with extra motivation because beating a newly crowned champion instantly becomes a statement. Suddenly, every match feels like a final. Every opponent wants to become the player who ends the streak. That's why so many breakthrough stars struggle after winning their first major title. The pressure isn't created by the media. It's created by expectations. And that's exactly why Eala's opening match against Alicia Parks told us far more than the final score ever could. At first glance, it looked like a routine victory, but the deeper story was much more impressive. Earlier this season, Parks had already beaten Eala in Australia after coming back from behind. This time, history looked ready to repeat itself. Eala won the opening set. Then momentum completely shifted. Parks started landing huge serves. She attacked relentlessly. The match suddenly felt like it was slipping away. For many young players, that's where frustration appears. They panic. They rush point. They start searching for winners that aren't there. But something about Alexandra Eala looked different. Instead of forcing the issue, she made adjustments. She stepped farther back on the returns. She stopped trying to overpower Parks. She extended the rallies. She forced one extra shot, then another. And little by little, the entire match changed direction. That wasn't revenge. That was evolution. That's the difference between a talented player and a player who's learning how to solve problems during matches. But here's where the story becomes even more fascinating. Because that victory wasn't an isolated performance. It was simply the latest chapter in what's becoming one of the most remarkable stretches of Eala's young career. Think about everything that's happened over the last few weeks. At Wimbledon, she announced herself on one of tennis' biggest stages. She battled through the draw with fearless tennis, eventually reaching the fourth round and earning one of the biggest wins of her career against Iga Swiatek. That victory wasn't just another upset. It completely changed the conversation surrounding her future. Fans stopped asking if she belonged. They started asking how high she could climb. Most players would have struggled to handle that kind of attention. Instead, Eala somehow found another gear. She arrived in Washington carrying enormous expectation. The field was loaded with experienced champions. Every round looked tougher than the last. Yet somehow, she kept finding answers. She defeated Qinwen Zheng. Then came Leylah Fernandez. After that, she overcame Alina Svitolina. She outplayed Naomi Osaka. And finally, she defeated Jessica Pegula to capture the biggest title of her career. Look at those names again. That's not the path of someone benefiting from a lucky draw. That's a champion beating elite players one after another. At some point, the word upset simply doesn't apply anymore. Because when something happens over and over again, it stops being a surprise. It becomes your level. And that's exactly where Alexandra Eala finds herself today. She's no longer trying to convince people she belongs among the best. She's trying to prove she belongs there permanently. But every great story eventually reaches a new test. And this one arrives in the form of Caty McNally. Unlike many of the players Eala has faced recently, McNally isn't built around overwhelming power. She doesn't rely on blasting winners from every corner of the court. Instead, she wins with unpredictability. And sometimes, that's even more dangerous. For the last couple of seasons, injuries have made it almost impossible for McNally to build consistent momentum. Every time she looked ready for a breakthrough, another setback followed. A wrist injury, a shoulder problem, months away from competition, another comeback, Another interruption. For many players, that cycle destroys confidence, but it never completely erased McNally's talent. Now, for the first time in a long while, she finally looks healthy again. And if anyone doubted that, her opening round performance erased those doubts immediately. Facing one of the tournament's biggest favorites, reigning Wimbledon champion Linda Noskova, McNally produced one of the biggest surprises of the week. She didn't simply win. She controlled the match from start to finish. She disrupted rhythm. She attacked at exactly the right moment. She refused to let Noskova settle into comfortable baseline exchanges. And perhaps most importantly, she reminded everyone that confidence can return much faster than rankings suggest. But here's the question that makes this matchup so compelling. Can Alexandra Eala continue riding the biggest wave of her career? Or is Caty McNally about to become the first player in weeks to completely change the script? Because once these two step onto the court, momentum alone won't decide the winner. Styles will. What makes this matchup so fascinating is that neither player wants to play the same kind of tennis. That's where the real battle begins. Alexandra Eala is at her best when rallies develop naturally. She loves building points patiently. She absorbs pace. She moves opponents from side to side. Then, almost without warning, she changes direction with that smooth left-handed forehand that has become one of the most dangerous shots in her game. She's comfortable living inside long rally. The longer the exchange lasts, the more the odds begin to shift in her favor. Because very few players on tour cover the court as efficiently as she does right now. McNally sees the court completely differently. She doesn't want rhythm. She wants chaos. One rally might include a deep slice. The next point might feature an immediate serve and volley. Then suddenly she'll throw in a drop shot. Before her opponent has time to adjust, she's already standing at the net looking for an easy volley. That's years of doubles experience showing itself. She isn't trying to overpower opponent. She's trying to outthink them. And sometimes, that's even harder to defend against. This will be the first career meeting between Alexandra Eala and Caty McNally. That alone adds another layer of uncertainty. There are no previous head-to-head patterns, no mental advantage, no familiar game plan. Everything will have to be figured out in real time. And that's exactly why the opening few games could shape the entire afternoon. If McNally succeeds in making every rally feel uncomfortable, if she keeps changing speed, if she constantly forces Eala to hit low balls, if she refuses to let the Filipino star settle into her preferred rhythm, then suddenly this becomes a completely different match. But if Eala survives that early storm, everything changes. Because once she establishes rhythm, she's one of the toughest players to stop. Her heavy topspin starts pushing opponents farther behind the baseline. Her movement begins creating impossible angle. Her confidence grows with every extended exchange. And before opponents realize what's happening, they're the ones reacting instead of attacking. That's exactly what happened throughout Washington. Several opponents started aggressively. Several opponents even looked in control early. Yet almost every time, Eala found another solution. That's becoming her greatest weapon. Not her forehand, not her backhand, not even her movement. Her greatest weapon is adaptation. Every champion eventually reaches a stage where winning isn't about playing perfect tennis. It's about solving problems faster than the person standing across the net. And over the last month, Alexandra Eala has become one of the tour's best problem solvers. But there's one challenge she can't solve with tactics alone: fatigue. Winning tournaments comes with a price. Washington demanded everything. 5 emotionally draining victories, 5 matches against world-class opponents, 5 nights of pressure. Most players celebrate the trophy. Very few people talk about what comes afterward. Recovery. Then almost immediately, another tournament begins. Another flight. Another practice session. Another opening round battle. Against Alicia Parks, Eala was pushed into another physical 3-set contest. That's a lot of tennis in a very short period. Meanwhile, Caty McNally arrives with fresher legs. Her opening victory required far less physical effort. She had extra recovery time, extra preparation, extra energy. That difference may not matter during the opening set, but if this match stretches beyond 2 hours, every sprint, every recovery step, every long rally will become increasingly important. Championship tennis is often decided by tiny margins. Sometimes it isn't the better shot maker who wins. Sometimes it's simply the player whose legs remain fresher in the third set. Still, if recent weeks have taught us anything, it's that counting Alexandra Eala out has become a dangerous mistake, because she seems to get stronger when matches become more complicated. Look back at the Washington final. Jessica Pegula pushed her repeatedly. There were moments when momentum appeared ready to swing. Yet when the deciding stretch arrived, Eala played some of her cleanest tennis of the entire tournament. The same thing happened against Alicia Parks. She lost control during the second set. Many players would have allowed frustration to grow. Instead, she reset mentally, raised her level, and finish the match with authority. That's not luck, that's maturity. It's also reflected in the numbers. This season, Eala has already collected multiple victories against top 20 opponents. That statistic alone tells you her breakthrough wasn't built on one magical week. Consistency is beginning to replace surprise. On the other side, McNally's serving numbers during her opening round upset were outstanding. She won the overwhelming majority of points behind her first serve. More importantly, she consistently followed strong serves with aggressive first strikes. That's exactly the formula she'll need again. If she allows Eala to dictate baseline rally, the match could slip away quickly. But if she serves accurately, attacks the net fearlessly, and keeps changing the pace, she has every chance to make this one of the toughest tests Eala has faced since lifting the Washington Trophy. So what ultimately decides this match? For Caty McNally, the answer is unpredictability. She cannot allow Alexandra Eala to settle. Every service game has to feel different. Every rally needs a new pattern. Every opportunity at the net has to be taken. She must make Eala uncomfortable from the very first point. For Alexandra Eala, the objective is much simpler. Stay patient, trust your movement, extend the rallies, attack the second serve. Accept that not every point will look beautiful, because against players like McNally, patience often becomes your most powerful weapon. If Eala turns this into a baseline contest, she should gradually take control. If McNally succeeds in breaking the rhythm over and over again, fans could be treated to one of the most entertaining matches of the Canadian Open. And honestly, that's exactly why this contest deserves so much attention. It isn't just a battle between two talented players. It's a battle between two completely different tennis philosophies. Power through patience versus victory through variety. One style will survive, the other will have to adjust. My prediction, Alexandra Eala wins in 3 hard-fought sets. Not because the match will be easy, far from it. Caty McNally has the creativity, experience, and tactical intelligence to make life extremely difficult. She'll win stretches of this match. She'll force Eala into uncomfortable situations. She'll probably frustrate her more than any opponent has in recent weeks. But champions aren't measured by how often Plan A works. They're measured by what happens when Plan A fails. And that's the biggest reason I'm backing Alexandra Eala. Over the last month, she's developed something every elite player eventually learns. The ability to stay calm when momentum disappears. The ability to adjust instead of panic. The ability to solve problems one point at a time. If she brings that same mindset onto the court once again, the winning streak may continue. And if it does, the rest of the WTA Tour won't just be talking about Alexandra Eala as the breakthrough story of the summer. They'll start talking about something even bigger. A player who isn't chasing greatness anymore. A player who's beginning to make greatness look like the new normal.